everyone. Sometimes natural things like clouds, mountains, trees, when seen from a distance, appear to be in certain shape. The great stone face was a work of nature. It was a human face carved on a mountain, and there was a prophecy attached to it. What is a prophecy? And what was the prophecy attached to the great stone face? Let's read in the chapter, The Great Stone Face. The chapter is in two parts. In this video, we will read part 1. Before you read, seen from a distance, hilltops and huge rocks seem to assume various shapes. They may resemble an animal or a human figure. People attribute stories to these shapes. Some stories come true, others don't. The great stone face is one such shape that reminds the inhabitants of the valley of a prophecy. What was it? Did it come true? So often when we see hilltops and huge rocks from distance, they appear in certain shapes. They often resemble shapes like that of animals or human figure, and people often attach stories to them, stories to these shapes. Some stories sometimes come true, others don't. The great stone face was one such shape which reminded the people of the valley of a prophecy. What was it, and did the prophecy come true? One afternoon, when the sun was going down, a mother and her little boy sat at the door of their cottage, talking about the great stone face. They had only to lift their eyes, and there it was, plain to be seen, though miles away, with the sunshine brightening all its features. One afternoon, when it was time of sunset, it was late afternoon, a mother and her little boy, they were sitting at their doorstep, at the doorstep of their little hut, and they were talking about the great stone face. They just had to lift their eyes to see the great stone face. It was though miles away, but it was clearly visible from their hut, and the sunshine was brightening all the features of the great stone face. And what was the great stone face? The great stone face was a work of nature formed on the perpendicular side of mountain. Perpendicular means straight, cliff of rock. It was rising very steeply by some immense rocks. Immense means huge, very big rocks, which had been thrown together so that when viewed at a proper distance, they resemble the features of a human face. So what was great stone face? It was a work of nature. It was found on the perpendicular, that means straight front side of the mountain, and it was nothing but huge rocks that were piled one on another. And they were piled in such a way, they were kept in such a way that when it was seen from a distance, it looked like a human face. If the spectator approached too near, spectator means observer, the person who is watching it, he lost the outline of the enormous means very big, huge, face, and could see only heap of gigantic rocks. Gigantic means huge, immense, piled one upon another. So if the person who is observing, he would go very near to the mountain, he would not see any face but just huge rocks that were kept one upon another. But seen from a distance, the clouds clustering about it, clustering means gathering, the great stone face seemed positively to be alive. It was the belief of many people that the valley owed much of its fertility. Fertility means productivity, to the benign is kind, face that was continually beaming over it. So it was the belief of the people of the mountain that the productivity of the valley is because of the kind face of the great stone face that was continually looking over it. So the great stone face was a work of nature. It was a human feature carved on a mountain, and it was formed by huge rock piling one over another. And if the observer went too near the mountain, the features would disappear and he would just see some rocks huge rocks that are piled over one another. But seen from a distance with the cloud gathering around the stone face looked very alive, and it was the belief of many people of the valley that the productivity of the valley is because of the stone face which is continuously watching them. A mother and her little boy, as we said earlier, sat at the door of their cottage, gazing at the great stone face and talking about it. The child's name was Ernest. So the child who was mentioned in the beginning of the story, his name was Ernest. And the mother and the little boy, they were sitting at their doorstep and they were looking at this great stone face and they were talking about it. Mother, said he, while the great stone face smiled on him, I wish that it could speak, for it looks so very kind that its voice must indeed be pleasant. If I ever see a man with such a face, I would love him very much. So the child expressed his desire. He said that, Mother, I wish that the great stone face could speak. And if there is any person who is like the great stone face, whose voice must be very pleasant, I would be very happy to meet such man and I would love that person a lot. If an old prophecy should come to pass, prophecy is a statement that tells what will happen in the future. It's a declaration about future. Answered his mother, we may see a man sometime with exactly such a face as that. What prophecy do you mean, dear mother? Eagerly inquired Ernest. Please tell me about it. So the mother told Ernest that if an old prophecy comes true or is to be believed, then we may see a man in the future who would have exactly same face as that of stone face. Ernest became very eager now and he asked, what prophecy do you mean, dear mother? What prophecy are you talking about? Please tell me about it. So his mother told him a story that her own mother had told her when she herself was younger than little Ernest, that at some future day a child should be born near here who was destined means meant to, fated to, become the greatest and noblest means a person of admirable, very nice qualities, of time, and whose face in manhood should bear an exact resemblance means similarity, to the great stone face. So the mother told Ernest a story which her mother has told her when she herself was little younger than Ernest, that someday in the future around the valley a child would be born who was meant to become the greatest and noblest, a great person of his time, and whose face when he becomes a man would be exactly same as that of stone face. Many still had faith in that old prophecy, but others took it to be nothing but idle talk. Idle talk means useless conversation. At all events, the great man of the prophecy had not yet appeared. So many people in the valley believed in that old prophecy, but others think that it was just a useless conversation. After all, the man who would be exactly same as that of stone face has not yet come. Oh, mother, cried Ernest, clapping his hands above his head, I do hope that I shall live to see him. His mother was an affectionate and thoughtful woman. It was proper, she thought, not to discourage the fanciful hopes of her little boy. Fanciful means imaginative and unrealistic. So she said to him, perhaps you may. Now, after hearing the prophecy, Ernest became very happy. He started clapping his hand and he said that I hope I would live that long to see him. The mother, who was a lovable and thoughtful woman, she thought that it is proper not to discourage her child's fanciful imaginations. So she said, perhaps you may live. And Ernest never forgot the story that his mother told him. It was always in his mind whenever he looked upon the great stone face. He spent his childhood in the log cottage where he was born, was dutiful to his mother and helpful to her in many things, assisting her much with his little hands and more with his loving heart. In this manner, from a happy yet very pensive means thoughtful, child, he grew up to be mild and quiet youth. And the story that Ernest's mother told him always remained in his mind whenever he looked at the stone face. His childhood was spent in the log cottage where he used to live with his mother, and he was a very dutiful child. He used to help his mother with his small little hands and with more with his loving and caring heart. And in this way he became a happy yet very thoughtful child, and he was growing up to be a very quiet young boy. Ernest had no teacher, but the great stone face became one to him. When the work of the day was over, he would gaze at it for hours until he began to imagine that those vast features recognized him and gave him a smile of kindness and encouragement. So Ernest did not have any teacher, but the great stone face became his teacher. So after the day of work, he used to gaze, that means look at this stone face for hours, and he began to imagine that those big features of great stone face, they recognized him and they gave him the smile and kindness and they encouraged him. About this time, there went a rumor throughout the valley that the great man who was to bear a resemblance to the great stone face had appeared at last. It seems that many years before, a young man had left the valley and settled at a distant seaport. So as Ernest was growing, a rumor went in that valley that the man who resembles great stone face had finally appeared. A young man had left the valley many years ago and he had settled in a very distant faraway seaport. The man's name was Gathergold, which was his name, had set up as a shopkeeper and being sharp in business matters had become so very rich that it would have taken him 100 years only to count his wealth. So Gathergold was the man who was thought to resemble Great Stone Face, and the man had left the valley and he had settled to a distant seaport, and he had become very rich because he was very sharp in business matters, and he had earned so much money that it was believed that it would take him years to count his own money. In time, he thought of his native valley and decided to go back there and end his days where he had been born. So when time came, when he was old, he thought of the valley where he was born and he decided to go back there and end his days where he was born. Ernest had been deeply stirred by the idea. Stirred means moved or affected. That the great man, the noble man, the man of prophecy, after so many ages of delay, was at length to be seen in his native valley. So Ernest was deeply affected by this idea that the great man of the prophecy, after so much of delay, is finally returning to the valley. While the boy was still gazing up the valley one day and imagining that the great stone face returned his gaze, the noise of wheels was heard and a crowd of people cried, "Here comes the great Mr. Gathergold." So one day, while Ernest was as a boy, while he was still looking at the stone face and imagining, he heard noise, the sound of wheels coming in the valley, and people there, they gathered and they shouted, "Here comes great Mr. Gathergold." A carriage drawn by 4 horses dashed round the turn of the road. Within it, thrust partly out of the window, appeared the face of an old man with yellow skin. Now Gathergold came into the valley in a carriage which was carried by 4 horses. It stopped around the road at the turn of the road, and from the window of the carriage, partly the face, the yellow skin of the man was visible. "The very image of the great stone face," shouted the people. "Sure enough, the old prophecy is true. Here we have the great man at last." So people started shouting that he is the very resemblance, very image of stone face. And sure enough, the prophecy is true. At last we have the man who is great, and he has appeared. And what greatly puzzled Ernest, they seemed actually to believe that here was the likeness which they spoke of. He turned away sadly from the wrinkled shrewdness of that unpleasant face. Shrewdness means cunningness. And gazed up the valley, where the stone face seemed to say, "He will come. Fear not, Ernest, the man will come." But Ernest, after seeing the face of Gathergold, was sad, he was puzzled, and he thought that these people are believing that he is the likeness of stone face, that wrinkled, cunning person who has very unpleasant face, and he was very disheartened. He looked at the stone face, where the stone face seemed to say him that, "Fear not, don't worry, the man will come." So Gathergold was not at all the resemblance of stone face. Now the years went on and Ernest grew to be a young man. He attracted little notice from the inhabitants of the valley. Inhabitants means people who lived there. They saw nothing remarkable in his way. Remarkable means noticeable or exceptional way of life, except that when the labor means work, of the day was over, he still loved to gaze upon the great stone face. Now years went by and Ernest was growing. He grew up to be a young man, but nobody in the valley noticed him because he did nothing noticeable. There was nothing noticeable about him, except that after the work of the day was over, he would still love to look at the stone face. Their idea was that this was a folly. Folly means mistake, but pardonable. Pardonable means which can be forgiven, because Ernest was industrious. That means hardworking, kind and neighborly. So the idea, the thought of the people of the valley was that it was a folly. What folly? that looking at stone face for hours. Folly means mistake. So people used to think that it was a mistake done by Ernest, that he looks at stone face for hours, but it was not a big mistake and it can be forgiven. But because they thought that Ernest was very hardworking, he was kind and he was good to his neighbors. They did not know that the great stone face had become a teacher to him, and that the sentiment which was expressed in it would enlarge the young man's heart and fill it with deeper sympathies than other hearts. Sympathies means feelings of sorrow, approval, understanding. So the people did not know that the great stone face has become a teacher to Ernest, and it has filled the heart of Ernest with such sentiments which cannot be found in other hearts. He was becoming kind and wise because of stone face. They did not know that from this would come a better wisdom that could be learned from books. Neither did Ernest know that the thoughts which came to him so naturally in the fields and at the fireside were of a higher tone than those which all men shared with him. So the people did not know that the wisdom that he is getting from stone face cannot be learned from books. Even Ernest didn't know that the wisdom that is naturally coming to him was much better than those which men shared with him, which other people shared with him. A simple soul, simple as when his mother first told him the whole story. He beheld the marvelous face. Beheld means saw. Marvelous means wonderful. Looking down the valley, and still wondered why its human likeness was so long in coming. So he was very simple at heart, simple as when his mother first told him the story. So Ernest would look at the stone face and wonder at the wonderful face of the stone face and wonder why the human likeness, the person who would resemble him, is taking so long to come. By this time, poor Mr. Gathergold had died and buried. His wealth, which was the body and spirit of his existence, had disappeared before his death. Since the melting away of his gold, it had been generally agreed that there was no likeness after all between the ruined merchant and the majestic face upon the mountain. Ruined means destroyed. So by this time, Mr. Gathergold was dead. All his money, which was everything of his existence, had also gone before his death, and with the going away of his money, it was generally agreed that there was no resemblance between this completely destroyed merchant and the majestic face of the stone face. It so happened that another son of the valley had become a soldier many years before. After a great deal of hard fighting, he was now a famous commander. He was known on the battlefield by the name of Blood and Thunder. There was another son of valley, another person who had become a soldier many years ago, and after a great deal of fighting, he became a famous commander, and in the war field he was known by the name Blood and Thunder. Old and tired now, he had lately expressed a desire to return to his native valley. The inhabitants, his old neighbors and their grown-up children, prepared to welcome the renowned commander. Renowned means famous. So when he was old and he was tired, he expressed that he wants to come back to his native valley, where the people and his old neighbors and their grown-up children, they all prepared to welcome him. It was being said that at last the likeness of the great stone face had actually appeared. Great therefore was the excitement throughout the valley, and many people who had never once thought of glancing at the great stone face now spent much time in gazing at it, for the sake of knowing exactly how General Blood and Thunder looked. So the people in the valley, they were very excited, and they thought that now finally the man in the prophecy is coming back, and people who had never looked at the stone face had started looking at it only just for knowing how General Blood and Thunder exactly looked. On the day of General's arrival, Ernest and all the other people of the valley left their work and proceeded to the spot where a great banquet means feast, food for everyone, had been prepared. Soldiers stood on guard, flags waved, and the crowd roared. Ernest was standing too far back to see Blood and Thunder's face. However, he could hear several voices. "It's the same face, exactly," cried one man, dancing for joy. So on the day when General was arriving, Ernest and other people of the valley, they left their work early and went to the spot where General Blood and Thunder was about to appear. There were soldiers guarding the place, flags were waved. Ernest was standing at a distance. He couldn't see the face of blood and thunder. However, he could hear people shouting, and they were shouting that it's the exact same face. Wonderfully like it. That's a fact, replied another. And why not? Cried a third. He is the greatest man of this or any other age, beyond a doubt. So people in the valley, they were shouting that he is the exact resemblance, he is the greatest person. Ernest at last could see the general's face, and in the same glance to the side, he could also see the great stone face. If there was such a likeness as the crowd proclaimed means announced or declared, Ernest could not recognize it. Now finally, Ernest could see the face of the journal, and at the same time, next to it, he could see the face of great stone face. And he just thought, if there was anything that is similar as the crowd is announcing between the journal and the stone face, he could not see it. So Ernest was again disheartened because he couldn't see any similarity between the journal and the great stone face. Fear not, Ernest, said his heart, as if the great stone face was whispering to him. Fear not, Ernest, he will come. So again he could, in his heart, he could hear the voice, and it appeared as if the great stone face himself was whispering, was saying to him, fear not, Ernest, the person will come. So this was the end of part 1. Now you can go through the comprehension check, the question answers. You can pause the videos and see the answers. I would like you to write the answer first yourself and then cross check. Here I will pause for a moment, or you can also pause the video and go through the question answers. So this was the first part of the chapter, the great stone face, students. The second part will be uploaded soon. Till then, you can wait for the next video. Take care of yourself. Bye bye.